Good day, and welcome to everyone in the room and online, and thank you for joining this side event, which will explore the relationship between biofouling and global shipping emissions. So why are we here at COP26, talking about aquatic plants and animals and invasive aquatic species, and just how does it relate to the shipping industry's greenhouse gas emissions and the industry's path to decarbonisation? International shipping is estimated to be responsible for nearly 3% of annual global greenhouse gas emissions, and we know that this needs to be addressed. While working to find the future fuels that will facilitate one of the biggest transitions ever faced by the industry, we must also leave no stone unturned on our path to get there, our path to decarbonisation. Considering the time that will be needed to scale up current and future green fuel alternatives, there is a need to look at initiatives that can be taken up rapidly and where solutions are readily available. Using innovative technology solutions and applying best management practices are going to be critical in achieving at least part of the IMO greenhouse gas reduction targets that have been set out for shipping by 2050. Implementing state-of-the-art management of biofouling will result in significant fuel efficiency gains and therefore help reduce emissions. And it can happen now. This is why we, BIMCO, the world's largest direct entry membership organisation for the shipping industry, and our co-organisers, the International Chamber of Shipping and the International Association of Oil and Gas Producers, feel that this topic needs to be addressed at COP26. Our event today will focus on preliminary results of a new study on the impact of biofouling growth on fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions, which has been undertaken by the GEF UNDP IMO GloFouling Partnerships Project, led by the International Maritime Organization and its Global Industry Alliance. This is an alliance of leaders from the private sector representing maritime industries working together to support improved biofouling management. We will hear how the study is making leaps and bounds in quantifying savings of greenhouse gas emissions resulting from biofouling management measures, which is essential to understand the full potential of biofouling management and what this means globally when applied to all ships. So I hope you'll enjoy today's discussions, and I'm delighted that we can open the side event with some remarks from IMO Secretary General, Mr. Ki-Tak Lim. Has your clicker not worked? He's standing very quiet. Can we have a look at some sound?
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the International Maritime Organization, I'm extremely pleased to welcome you to this event, jointly organized by BIMCO, ICS, IOGP, and the IMO GloFouling Partnerships Project. The GloFouling Project is a cooperation between IMO, the Global Environment Facility, the GEF, and the United Nations Development Programme to promote the best management practices that will minimize ships' biofouling and its impact on the marine environment, thereby preventing the introduction of the invasive aquatic species and reducing GHG emissions from ships. Addressing climate change is the biggest challenge of our time. That is why we are all gathered here at COP26. The latest technical reports send a clear message that we need to accelerate the reduction of GHG emission in all industrial and transport sectors, and the shipping has to play its part. The implementation of IMO's initial strategy on the reduction of GHG emissions from shipping, adopted in 2018, is underway with a concrete short-term measure to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from ships and a work plan was agreed to develop mid and long-term measures, including work upgrading our strategy by 2023. Managing ships biofouling is one important short-term operational measure that can significantly contribute to reducing GHG emissions from ships. Today, you will hear about a new study providing a better understanding of the relationship between ships biofouling management and the potential for GHG emission savings. This report was commissioned by the Global Industry Alliance for Marine Biosafety. It is one of several innovative public-private partnerships established between IMO and the maritime industry, which have proven to be very successful for addressing global marine environmental issues, with the private sector leaders contributing their technical resources and their expertise. Other partners of the GloFouling Partnerships Project, namely BIMCO, IOGP, and ICES, are working toward decarbonizing shipping and have joined forces to shed light on how managing biofouling can help curb GHG emissions. This is a good example of how a proactive and collaborative approach can help find solutions to combat climate change. In partnership with IMO and its GloFouling project, shipping and other maritime industry can play a critical role in protecting the marine environment and in achieving global energy efficiency goals. I wish you a successful event. Thank you.
And thank you to Mr. Kitak Lim, Secretary General of the IMO. I would now like to introduce Dr. Yigit Demirel. Dr. Demirel is currently Senior Lecturer and Associate Professor in the Department of Naval Architecture, Ocean and Marine Engineering at the University of Strathclyde, right here in Glasgow. He is also the Departmental Exchange Coordinator within the department and a member of the University Senate. His research interests lie in computational and experimental hydrodynamics. He is actively engaged in fundamental and industry-focused research on the effect of roughness, hull fouling, and fouling control coatings on ship performance, energy efficiency of ships, hull propeller optimization, and energy-saving devices. Dr. Demirel has worked on several international collaboration projects, published numerous papers in high-ranked journals, and presented his research at several international conferences and workshops. In 2017, Dr. Demirel was appointed to the Resistance and Propulsion Committee of the International Towing Tank Conference, which sets best practice standards for large-scale hydrodynamics facilities worldwide. He was appointed as an advisory board member of the European University of the Seas Alliance in December 2019 for a duration of 3 years. Dr. Demirel will provide us with an overview of the study commissioned by the GloFouling Partnerships Project and its Global Industry Alliance. Dr. Demirel, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for the nice introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Yiğit, and I'm delighted to be here today to present our report on the impact of ships biofouling on greenhouse gas emissions. So as mentioned, the aim of this report is to actually address the poor understanding of the relationship between biofouling and ship greenhouse gas emissions. So therefore, today we will be hopefully seeing some good preliminary results, and I hope that this report might shed some light on the problem. So first of all, we all know maritime transportation is very important for the transport of goods and people, and although it is very environmentally friendly compared to other transport methods, it is still, so maritime transportation still contributes to around 3% of the greenhouse gas emissions every year due to its size. So in order to reduce these greenhouse gas emissions, International Maritime Organization has adopted a series of legally binding design and operation indices, and each individual ship actually has to follow these rules. And obviously, this is directly related to the energy efficiency of ships. And the energy efficiency of ships also directly related to ships' hydrodynamic drag. And the hydrodynamic drag is a direct function of the underwater wetted area of the hull. So therefore, to maintain a hull which is clean, free from biofouling is of paramount importance for efficiency. So biofouling, which is the unwanted accumulation of microorganisms, plants, algae, barnacles, tube worms, and etc., they are known to increase the roughness of the colonized surfaces. And as you can imagine, if these are colonizing on the ship hull or propeller, or actually any other marine assets, then we will see an increase in the roughness on the surface, and then we see an increase in the drag, and consequently we see the increase in the fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. So therefore, we really need to do something. We need to bring an understanding, and we need to define how the ships are affected by the existence of biofouling. So this is the main idea, this is the main aim of this report. Now that it's critical to understand this relationship between biofouling and the greenhouse gas emissions, and also the tools that can be used to mitigate biofouling accumulation, this report is twofold. So the first part is to analyze the impact of biofouling accumulation on the energy efficiency of ships. And second is to analyze the sustainable solutions currently available to ship owners to effectively reduce greenhouse gas emissions through the minimization of biofouling. So this report will be compiling the existing data from literature, and also it will consist some newly developed research. So the first part of the report actually consists of many different studies that are published in the literature, and it is compiling all the data and somehow represents all the findings in a goal-based manner so that everyone can understand more or less the same thing from these reports. Because in the literature you see many different methods, many different results, so sometimes it's difficult to compare these results. So we bring them together and then we try to interpret them. So here, for example, what you see is a very lower end of the biofouling, so say light slime. So in the x-axis, you see the hydrodynamic roughness, and on the y-axis, you see the increase in the GHG emissions due to the existence of this light slime. So although one will not expect so much effect from this kind of light slime or deteriorated coating, we see enormous increases in the greenhouse gas emissions. So for example, 0.5 millimeter biofilms, if they are covering 50% of a bulk carrier, say 175 meter bulk carrier, then we see around 20 to 25% increase in the greenhouse gas emissions, of course, depending on the operational profile, the length of the ship, and many other prevailing conditions. And if we look at other more severe biofouling conditions, for example, small calcareous fouling or heavy slime, as expected, the effects are increasing actually dramatically. For example, if we are looking at a 320 meter tanker with 5 millimeter barnacles on the hull, we see increases around 50–55%. And if we are looking at, say, a small container ship around 230 meter long with 2.5 millimeter barnacles, with only 10% coverage, we see 34–35% increases in the greenhouse gas emissions. So as we see, the effects are actually detrimental and more than what the shipping industry would expect. Fortunately, we have some tools which we can call biofouling control strategies, that can effectively mitigate the accumulation of biofouling on the ship hulls and propellers, and therefore reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So these biofouling control strategies may include optimized fouling control coatings, some underwater cleaning technologies, some ultrasonic anti-fouling systems, and others, which all of them can be bring together, and actually they can be part of the solution. So therefore, our newly developed research will be focusing on the effect of such tools on the efficiency of ships. And to be able to do that, actually, we are going to use some state-of-the-art modeling techniques, for example, computational fluid dynamics, and a time-based approach, so that we can actually represent the realistic heterogeneous biofouling accumulation on ship hulls and propellers, and also we can look at the effect of these biofouling control strategies more realistically. For example, partly cleanings or some niche area cleanings. So by using these tools, we can actually make predictions very accurately. And our preliminary results actually show great agreement with the findings from the industry or the recent, let's say, surveys from the industry. And it shows that these biofouling control strategies can be effectively used to mitigate such effects. So therefore, I believe, especially in the short to medium term, the optimized use of these strategies can be definitely used as part of the solution to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions until other technologies are developed in the long run. So this is pretty much all I wanted to say, and I would like to thank you very much for your attention. If there are any questions, I'm always happy to address them. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Demirel, for setting us up very nicely for the panel discussion, and I'm sure there will be lots of questions, so don't worry. During the panel, we will hear about several initiatives being undertaken to manage ships' biofouling and to maximise the opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from shipping in the short term. So in addition, we've already heard from Dr. Demirel, of course, but in addition to that, we also have a number of other panelists who I'd now like to introduce. In the room today, we have Mr. Camille Bourgeon, Technical Officer, International Maritime Organisation, Dr. Bev Mackenzie, London Representative and Manager, Marine Environment for BIMCO, the Honourable Titalupe Fanapuvava to Ivakau, Tonga High Commissioner, Faka Mole Mole for the pronunciation, and Dr. Lilia Coget El Kiel, Project Technical Manager, GloFouling Partnerships. In addition, we'll hear some contributions by video from Dr. Andrew Hudson, Head of Water and Ocean Governance Programme, United Nations Development Programme, and Dr. Darren Jones, Managing Director, MRG Marine Limited, Solihull, representing the Global Industry Alliance. We hope we'll finish with plenty of time to field lots of questions from the floor and also from those watching virtually. But if I may, I'd like to turn my first question to Dr. Demirel. I told you there'd be some questions coming. Biofouling accumulation happens over time. Is there any way of assessing realistic impacts of the biofouling and or anti-fouling systems on the overall greenhouse gas emissions for the lifetime of the ship?
Well, thank you very much for the question, David. So, in fact, this is a difficult question, and all the studies that are in the literature generally focus on one condition. So, say they would compare what is the effect of this very moment if we have such fouling on the ship hull and propeller, and what is the effect on the greenhouse gas emissions. However, now we are developing a time-based approach which takes into account the biofouling accumulation on time. Obviously, we are using some models, and these models were developed using the data from industry, from different companies. So in this model, we can take into account this biofouling accumulation on time. So therefore, it gives us better predictions in time, and especially using some biofouling mitigating measures, they are actually working over time. So if you look at only one point in time, then sometimes it might be misleading, because obviously to apply or use these tools, you would be spending some money. So if you look at only one point at a time, then it might be misleading, but it is possible to model the time-based fouling. And if we use this model and show the effect of these biofouling mitigating measures on the numbers on the life cycle of a ship, then I believe it will be more meaningful. So I hope that we are going to do this, and I believe our aim is to maybe have a follow-up study which would have much more data from industry, and I believe we can achieve a very good accuracy in short time. I hope this answers your question. Thank you.
Yes, it did, and I certainly like the idea about the follow-up study from industry. It sounds like you've trailed that very, very well indeed. No, thank you. Thank you for the response.
Thank you.
I'd now like to turn to Dr. Bev McKenzie. So, Bev, the shipping industry itself obviously has a large role to play in greenhouse gas reduction of its operations. Would you be able to provide an overview of what steps the industry has been taking to look at biofouling management to support the greenhouse gas reductions that might be possible as introduced by Dr. Demerol?
Great. Yes, thank you, David. I think first of all, it's worthwhile saying actually these results are very exciting for the industry. It's really good to get these results in kind of one place, and it emphasizes just what the impact of biofouling on the GHG emissions for a ship could be, and also the efficiency gains that could potentially be made. The strong scientific basis that helps ensure ships undertake biofouling management and remove these growth of organisms is really good. You know, it's always good to have scientific evidence to help with the decision making. I would like to, before I talk a bit more about and answer the question, is just to reiterate, we are at the COP, what David said in his introduction, and that the absolute goal of the shipping industry is to decarbonise. The shipping industry knows that we're going to have to adopt alternative fuels to do so, and this isn't going to happen overnight. So again, this is really exciting that we're talking about a measure here that can be implemented practically overnight and have some really good gains very quickly. So moving on to biofouling specifically, I think it's pertinent to point out that ship owners take biofouling management very seriously already. This isn't new. At BIMCO, we've very recently undertaken a survey amongst our membership. The results have yet to be released, but I can give you a little sneak peek today. And those results show that 80% of those who responded, which was representing a large number of ships, are already applying the IMO biofouling guidelines, which we've heard mentioned, and we may hear mentioned again, to address the issue. And we've also seen lots of progress from the anti-fouling sector over the past few years. There are more and more technologies reaching the market, and they're all aiming to decrease the accumulation of these species, which can become invasive, and also to improve the performance of ships. What we actually found out in our survey, which is quite interesting, that if a ship owner is selecting a high performance anti-fouling coating, that actually a ship can remain fouling free for the lifetime of that coating, which can be quite long. And actually these coatings can stay fouling free for the order of 5 years. So I think combined with the results of the study we've heard today, and what we found out is that actually investing in a good anti-fouling system is something that could be done, would make a big impact. But also advances by the coating manufacturers and companies are going to be very important as we move forward. But of course, it would be remiss not to mention the fact that in some cases there are situations where the systems cannot maintain a fouling-free surface after some years. So what we're also promoting is an ability to undertake in-water cleaning. So that would be between the normal dry docking process. And that will help ships capitalize on this ability to become more efficient whilst not significantly interrupting global trade. And a careful balance does need to be achieved. If cleaning is not conducted with the right timing, there might be a risk of spreading invasive species and an increase of greenhouse gas emissions because of the drag. But if it's too often, then the anti-fouling system may not perform as well. So there's a really balance that we need to kind of think about. And to be able to do this, what we really need is ships to have access to safe, environmentally sustainable in-water cleaning companies on a global basis. We need the coastal states to provide necessary in-water cleaning facilities to enable ships to be able to realize these reductions. We do know, however, that cleaning the part of the ships that are submerged from the barnacles, the other growths, whilst in the water can transfer these species to the marine environments. But if the cleaning is done properly and effectively and the debris is captured, this risk is minimized. So what we've really done, and a very big step, is that the industry, together as a group, we've got together with our co-organizers, the International Chamber of Shipping and others, and we've developed a standard for in-water cleaning. There's requirements there that the material is removed from the ships, it's done sustainably, it's done safely. So we're really kind of making these advances too, so working on anti-fouling coatings, but also on making sure ships can be cleaned and stay clean. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bev, for that comprehensive response. We've touched on the IMO strategy a couple of times. So at this point, if I may, I'd like to turn the next question to Mr. Bourgeon. So, Mr. Bourgeon, the IMO has adopted an initial strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from shipping. Could you quickly introduce the strategy for us, please, and just add to that, how does good biofouling management contribute towards the IMO's ambitions?
Thank you. Thank you, David. Sorry. Yeah, indeed. So as been mentioned already by some speakers, including the Secretary General, the IMO member states have adopted in 2018 an initial strategy on reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from ships, which really now represents the overall framework, the global framework for action towards decarbonization of this global industry. And this strategy identifies a number of levels of ambition. Some of you mentioned the 2050 level of ambition, but it also includes a level of ambition for 2030, which is referred to in terms of carbon intensity or energy efficiency. And obviously, the cleaner source of energy is the energy we don't use. And so by setting this target of reducing the carbon intensity of international shipping by at least 40% by 2030 compared to 2008, the IMO actually already set a first target for the industry to reach. Now, the IMO's mandate is really to develop measures and regulations that applies to individual ships. And this is really what makes also this organization so special, I would say, in the IMO, in the UN family. And to start implementing this strategy in concrete terms, IMO member states have adopted amendments to the appropriate international instrument, which is the MARPOL Convention, Annex 6 to the MARPOL Convention. And these amendments, which were adopted in July or June this year, introduce new kinds of measures which do not specifically relate to biofouling management, because they are goal-based performance standards. But these measures, they aim really at reducing the carbon intensity of shipping by at least 40% by 2030. So these are technical measures called the Energy Efficiency Existing Ship Index, and operational measures that really look at the carbon intensity, the operational carbon intensity of the ship. And these measures, as I said, do not specifically relate to biofouling as biofouling management as a measure, but they set goals. These are goal-based measures, and definitely good biofouling management is certainly one of the measures, one of the means that can reduce fuel consumption and therefore the carbon intensity of shipping, along with other technical and operational measures such as wind assistance, speed optimization. There are many measures that are available, but definitely it's interesting to look at those short-term solutions that can be implemented rather easily to already put the industry in a pathway to reduce its carbon intensity.
Great, thank you very much. That's a very succinct description of what is obviously a huge strategy. So thank you, Camille. The Global Environment Facility and the United Nations Development Programme are the funding organisations of the GloFouling Partnerships project, under the framework of which the study we've heard about today has been developed. So we asked Dr. Andrew Hudson from the UNDP about the value of such projects and how they contribute to the global efforts to tackle greenhouse gas emissions from shipping. So we have a short video now to hear his response.
Greetings and thank you to BIMCO, ICS, and IOGP for organizing today's event and inviting UNDP to share some remarks. Greetings as well to my other panelists from IMO, the GloFouling team, the GloFouling GIA, the Government of Tonga, Stony Hull, and the University of Strathclyde. UNDP is the leading organization in the United Nations system in the fight against climate change, with an active climate change mitigation and clean energy portfolio valued at some US $800 million. UNDP is one of the Green Climate Fund accredited entities, also has one of the largest climate adaptation and mitigation portfolios with 36 projects valued at $1.16 billion, supporting 69 countries. UNDP's work on clean energy and climate change mitigation include programs helping to increase energy access in low-income countries, including through off-grid renewable energy solutions, promoting low-carbon transport, and improving energy efficiency in everything from buildings to appliances. A major focus of UNDP's climate and energy programming is on policy de-risking to support governments to design, implement, and enforce policies and regulations that can in turn catalyze sizable flows of private capital. UNDP also convenes and participates in multilateral action for clean energy through global initiatives such as the Climate Investment Platform, the Climate Promise, and the NDC Support Program. It's now well understood that shipping contributes on the order of 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and that this figure could grow substantially under a business as usual scenario, possibly doubling or more by 2050. Already, emissions have increased by almost 10% between 2008 and 2018. Recognizing this, UNDP recently partnered with IMO and the GEF in the Global Maritime Energy Efficiency Project, or GloMeep, which supported governments and the industry in advancing progress on the new IMO MARPOL 6 shipping energy efficiency standards, which required achieving greenhouse gas emissions reductions through both ship operation and design. Like its sister projects in the GEF, UNDP, IMO, GloX family of projects, GloMeep created a low-carbon global industry alliance to promote industry cooperation on tangible actions and solutions. The initial success of GloMeep helped the IMO to mobilize significant additional resources from Norway for the Green Voyage 2050 project that is now under implementation. So starting in 2017, UNDP again partnered with the IMO and the GEF in the development, the approval, and startup of the GloFouling Partnerships project. While the principal focus of the project was on biofouling management to reduce the risk of invasive species transfer, a secondary benefit of how biofouling control could reduce the sector's carbon footprint was recognized, as biofouling, by increasing the drag and the friction during a ship's passage, leads to increased fuel consumption and therefore higher greenhouse gas emissions. Since then, it's become even more apparent that efforts to minimize the carbon footprint of the shipping sector in a truly comprehensive manner must address this critical third factor, along with ship design and operation. UNDP was therefore very pleased to learn of the proposal by the GloFouling Global Industry Alliance to conduct a detailed study on the impact of biofouling on greenhouse gas emissions. Initial results of the study being launched today suggesting that as little as 0.5 millimeter of slime on around half the ship's exposed surface can increase greenhouse gas emissions by 20 to 25% is a real eye-opener. Similarly, the observation that biofouling by much rougher surfaced organisms such as barnacles can increase emissions by 55% is even more disturbing. Both of these observations underscore the timeliness of conducting this study, especially now, during this critical COP26 in Glasgow. The planned second section of the report, by looking at some of the existing industry practices for biofouling management, can help to identify some of the most technically and cost-effective approaches that can be replicated, scaled up, and further optimized. UNDP very much looks forward to the completion of this GloFouling report on the impact of ships biofouling on greenhouse gas emissions in February 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hudson. We heard some hard-hitting stats there, so we'll probably pick some of those up as we go into further questions later. But at this stage, can I turn to you, High Commissioner? Tonga is one of the beneficiary countries of the GloFouling project, and climate change will have a direct impact on Tonga as an island nation. But at the same time, Tonga depends on shipping for its economy and connectivity. So how would Tonga hope the shipping industry makes use of these preliminary results?
Thank you very much. The Kingdom of Tonga is one beneficiary country of the GloFouling Partnerships project. I would like to thank the IMO and in particular Dr. El Keel and her team at the GEF UNDP IMO GloFouling Partnerships for this invitation to share our perspective and appreciation of the partnership to date. Climate change will impact the Kingdom of Tonga directly as a large ocean state and depends on shipping for its economic sustainability and connectivity to the global market. How would Tonga hope the shipping industry makes use of these preliminary results? May I share 3 salient points in this regard? Firstly, as a maritime trading nation, Tonga is dependent upon shipping for essential goods, including foods, medicines, and machinery, as well as fossil fuels. As noted during the COVID-19 lockdown, the absence of income from the tourism sector has had positive effects of the increase of produce from our agriculture and fisheries sector to local and overseas markets, and in doing so, making the Kingdom of Tonga one of the most food-secured countries in the world. But there is an acute recognition that we as a nation are overly dependent on international shipping for our connectivity to the world. Tonga also highly values our ocean and marine environment, with the whale watching industry making up a significant portion of our domestic commercial fleet, and pre-COVID, a significant source of foreign income for the Kingdom. So protecting our marine biodiversity is of paramount importance. Secondly, to protect our marine biodiversity, making sure these visiting international ships don't bring unwanted organisms is vital. So biofouling, which both improves ship efficiency and consequently reduces emissions, and that prevents the spread of invasive species, is a win-win for Tonga. We will watch with interest developments of new methods and approaches to hull coatings and biofouling, and look forward to the ongoing work being done by IMO and the shipping industry initiatives to reduce emissions in every possible way. Without strong partnerships between industry groups, researchers, regulators, and decision makers, we are not going to reach the decarbonization targets needed to stay within the Paris temperature goals. And Tonga commends the organizers of this panel for highlighting what can be achieved through partnerships such as GloFouling Project, and looks forward to an ongoing collaboration with high ambition partners. Lastly, sea transportation is projected to increase in the future for Tonga and will be a key factor in our economic drive. This places much emphasis on the shipping sector contribution to the decreasing of GHG emissions should be enhanced at all levels. Having a national status assessment and national economic assessment report under this project will assist to identify the adverse impact of invasive species to Tonga's marine environment and the country's economy. Having also a national strategy in place will determine possible measures imposing on shipping industry to combat the effect of the aquatic invasive species in Tonga, hence contribution to decrease GHG emission from shipping industry. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the Kingdom of Tonga will continue to add its voice to those countries that are taking up the challenge of bringing our shipping emissions to zero by 2050. Geofouling is but one of the many ways to address GHG emissions. The Kingdom of Tonga remains committed to ensuring that its waters remain a biodiversity hotspot for the world and all species that claim it to be their ecosystem of preference, including the much alluded pods of whales that grace our waters at this time of the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, High Commissioner, and thank you too for not only covering emissions, but also sea transport and all-important marine biodiversity. I think that was the first time we'd heard that this afternoon, so thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. Dr. Koja Elkil, can I turn to you now, please? GloFouling Partnerships is a global project that promotes the implementation by participating countries of IMO's recommendations on ships' biofouling management. Why is private sector participation important to achieve the goals of the project?
Thank you for the question. Indeed, a very important question related to the participation of the industry. But maybe before answering your question, since we've been mentioning the GloFouling Partnerships project a couple of times already, I could explain a little bit in a nutshell what is this project about. So the GloFouling Partnerships project is really a global multi-stakeholder project, technical cooperation project to assist developing countries and small island nations to deal with one major threat to marine biodiversity, that is the introduction of invasive aquatic species. Now, dealing with biofouling management, keeping ships' hull clean, has also a positive side effect, which is obviously the greenhouse gas emissions that result from fuel consumptions. So for us, from the GloFouling Partnerships perspective, dealing with biofouling management, managing well biofouling on ships, is really a win-win solution because, of course, you protect marine biodiversity, but at the same time, you reduce your impact and greenhouse gas emissions. And it's also a quick win because we heard that is something that we can do immediately and that can be implemented on the short term. And we know that time is our enemy, actually, in fighting climate change. And we actually know what we need to do to keep ships clean from biofouling. The International Maritime Organization has adopted a set of international recommendations to deal with this issue, and so there are best management practices available out there to deal with this issue. To whom these recommendations are addressed? Well, to a variety of industry stakeholders, covering, of course, ship owners, but also ship operators, the coating industry, in-water cleaning service providers, ship designers. All these stakeholders should implement these IMO recommendations. So for us, it does make a lot of sense, actually, to open the door to industry contribution. And that's why this project, the GloFouling Partnerships project, as well as other projects, similar projects, being implemented by the International Maritime Organization, have included an industry component. And that takes the form of a kind of private-public partnerships through what we call Global Industry Alliance. So for the GloFouling Partnerships Project, this is the Global Industry Alliance for Marine Biodiversity, and this is really a group of industry champions, of private companies who committed to take the lead and promote best management practices. They are helping the uptake of these best management practices. And the study we heard about today, presented by Dr. Demirel, which actually highlight the magnitude of the impact on greenhouse gas emissions thanks to good biofouling management is a result of this ambition from our industry stakeholders.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, thank you for explaining more about the partnership and also the importance of that private-public sector involvement, but also reinforcing the point about this is a quick win-win, tackling both greenhouse gas emissions, but also marine biodiversity.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed, Lilia. Finally, we asked Dr. Darren Jones about the role of the Global Industry Alliance. The GIA is a group of private companies that have taken a step forward to improve biofouling management, and this study was the first activity commissioned by GIA members. We asked Mr. Jones the motivation behind selecting this report as a priority.
Great question. Before I answer it, I do just want to thank everybody for enabling this important topic to be discussed at COP26. And that's actually one of the key reasons that this was a priority for the GIA and for industry. We knew if we could raise the profile of biofouling beyond just invasive species, but to bring it here to COP26 to show the impact that biofouling has on CO2 emissions, is going to be a game changer. We need operators, ports, regulators to look at this and see the opportunity. The opportunity is to be seized. The technologies to solve this problem exist. The adoption has always been the problem. And quite often it's because nobody could agree on what the savings were, what the science was. We now have settled science. There is no longer a debate on what having a fouled hull, a fouled propeller, fouled wetted areas does in terms of CO2 emissions. The good news, the savings on fuel will be enormous, and therefore proper biofouling management, the use of in-water cleaning, different sorts of coatings, ultrasonics on niche areas, if we bring all this to bear, this mix, it will pay for itself. Not in years, but in months. The opportunity is huge. Regulators. We need regulators to read this and realise that we are part of the solution to an emergency, because once they understand that an emergency can be solved, they act. Look at what happened in COVID. 6 years for a vaccine, 6 months in reality. And the same goes in the marine industry. We can't wait for things like ultrasonics that are still thought of as new, yet they've been around for 2 decades, to be regulated in another 6 years. We haven't got time. This is an emergency. People need to act like it's an emergency. We need regulators to step up, CEOs to step up, CFOs to start understanding the return on investment from good biomanagement. We have an opportunity to make a difference, a material difference. And unlike much that's discussed at this conference, this will save money in the short term and the long term. It will not depend on what fuel you've got. This is absolutely for today and for tomorrow. It's time to embrace change. This report will help that.
So there we have it. We have the settled science. It's all about implementation and management, and the business case stacks up. That we've just heard from, as we've just heard from Mr. Jones. So thank you to all the panellists for your first response to those questions. We now have some time for questions from the floor and also for questions from those participating virtually. So now's the chance. I think we have some roving microphones. There's a question here at the front. I'm not sure how we're going to get you heard. Oh, you have to, sorry, I should have explained this. You have to move to the microphone, and if you can talk to the microphone, then our virtual attendees can hear you. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself before you ask your question. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Thanks very much to all the panelists. It's been really interesting to hear about the kind of intersections between biodiversity, greenhouse gas savings, and also saving money as well. So I'm Jacob Armstrong from Transport and Environment. We're an NGO based out of Brussels. Question is basically, it's to do with what Darren's kind of intervention, which is basically to do with regulators. What can regulators do to make sure these types of energy efficiency measures, as well as other things like wind assist, slow steaming, and other measures are pushed forward? Because obviously at the moment what we have is the CII, which unfortunately, so it's about intensity, but it might actually lead to an increase in absolute emissions fairly similar to business as usual up to 2030. So I wondered if there's any way that the revision of the initial strategy could be used to really make forceful impacts in energy efficiency, pushing things like this. So basic questions on regulators. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed for the question. And Camille, I guess you can see this question.
Yeah, sure, I can take that.
Away, so over
sure.
to you.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think you as you rightly mentioned, this short-term measure was designed really to achieve the 2030 target, which is about carbon intensity. And I am confident that thanks to these measures, the industry will actually reach the targets that were set by the IMO. Now, obviously, by reducing the carbon intensity, you also contribute to reducing the absolute volume of emissions. And this is, I think, what is mostly targeted through now what we're going to discuss, and we have just started to discuss in the IMO, and what is called mid and long-term measures. Mid and long-term doesn't mean that it's less a priority or less urgent, but it means that these are measures that are more far-reaching in terms of their implications, more complex as well. And so they will target the 2050 level of ambition, which is an absolute reduction of GHG emissions. That said, I would like also to mention that in the short-term measure that has been adopted this year is a review clause for 2026. And we anticipate, therefore, member states to continue the development of this measure and the consideration of this measure to further strengthen the reduction factors on CII by 2026 based on data that is gathered now. I hope this helps answering this question, and we can continue the discussion later.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you, Camille, for the response. Are there any more questions from the floor? Yes, there's one over there. Yes, please. Would you mind moving to the microphone? Thanks.
Can you? Is that right? Yes, I visited your stand this morning, and I was very impressed with the projects that are going on and what we've heard this afternoon. Does this system, will it also apply to the cruise industry? Because obviously they also have to go into dry dock and have all these things removed, the anti-fouling removed. And I just wondered whether, the same criteria and regulation will apply to the cruise industry, because there's a lot of cruise ships out there now.
Who'd like to answer that?
Regulations.
Do you want to go again, Camille?
Is the regulation applicable to the cruise industry?
Sorry, can I just ask a clarification whether you're mentioning, whether you're referring to energy efficiency regulations or whether you're referring to the IMO guidance on biofouling management?
Well, both really, yes.
Okay. Well, so basically I can just respond on the energy efficiency measures. They definitely apply to cruise ships. Yes, indeed. The shipping is diverse in nature, so when we're talking about shipping, actually many different segments. And the way regulation is designed in the IMO can take two approaches. One is to have the same standards that apply, for example, when you're talking about the fuel. We have regulations about the sulfur content of the fuel. In that case, this is the same standard that applies to all segments. But when it comes to energy efficiency, there is really a need to specify the requirements depending on the ship type and also the ship size. So, for example, there are different requirements when it comes to cruise ships and when it comes to bulk carriers or container ships, because they are so different in design, in operation, and so the regulation also takes a different approach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe I can answer
Yes, please.
on the guidelines of IMO related to ships biofouling management. So there are two sides to your question. And the first one is that these guidelines, which are called guidelines, are not actually mandatory. So they are there, and it is one of the role of the GloFouling Partnerships project to actually promote these guidelines and promote the implementation of these guidelines. Now, in terms of scope of these guidelines, yes, they do apply to the cruise industry. These guidelines apply basically to any ship which is more than 25 meters in length, and that includes all type of ships. The definition of ships in the guidelines is really large. You can have all type of ships under these guidelines, being barges, of course, cruise ships, container ships, oil tankers, anything basically that moves on top of the surface water is considered as a ship. So a very large definition which includes all type of ships.
Yes, please. Blue mask hand up went first, so and then we'll take your questions, sir, after that. Would you mind moving to the microphone? Thank you.
Thanks very much. My name's Liz. I'm from the University of Liverpool Environmental Sciences faculty. I wondered, when we looked at the billing for this session, it mentioned innovative technological solutions, and all the speakers seem to be indicating that those solutions are with us. We've heard about steam, we've heard about ultrasonics, but I just wondered, maybe I'm out of date, but have we really got innovative technological solutions which are environmentally friendly enough to apply on a large scale?
So, panel, you heard Liz's question. Have we got enough innovative solutions on a scale that, to make an effect? Who'd like to pick that up? I see some nodding.
I can have a go.
Off you go, Bev.
Yeah, I mean, I think at scale, probably no, and also at cost. And cost is really interesting because it was mentioned by Darren in the last speaker, and I didn't mention it, but perhaps should, is actually there are huge cost savings with being more efficient. So there are big incentives for ship owners to select the most efficient way of coating, and hopefully with the results of this study that will drive some of that kind of innovation forward. The anti-fouling systems on the market are very good, some of them not so good, and the standards potentially need to be levelled to help the ship owners make the best decision and have the best information. And we also need to kind of look at, and Darren mentioned it, how quickly the new technologies that aren't new can be approved for use and address some of the kind of emerging issues that might be coming up with coatings. You know, when you have you mentioned the word ultrasonics, and people start getting concerned about noise and all those kind of. It's a really difficult picture to kind of to map, and you know, ship owners need the information to be able to select a coating that's going to last them a long time, and they're not going to get into trouble for being an early mover and selecting one that they then find can't be used in a certain part of the world, isn't as good as they thought. So that clarity, and that comes from the guidelines and the regulatory piece to make sure those are all available. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Darren, who would be the kind of expert on this, wasn't able to come here in person. So, but yeah, as he said, that, you know, some of these technologies have been available for a long time, and we just need to work out how to scale them up, and hopefully these results will incentivize that.
So prevention and cure, so the coating, and that, if that doesn't work, then the cleaning. Thank
Yep.
you very much. Thanks.
Lily, would you like to add to that?
If I may add a bit on technology. So the technology is there. We need to understand better the technology and its performance, and that is why technical cooperation projects such as the GloFouling Project and other projects, similar projects, being implemented by the International Maritime Organization have almost all a technology component. What we are trying to achieve is also to facilitate access to the technology, especially for developing countries. So I can cite some projects which are being carried out currently at IMO. There are about 10 projects focusing on greenhouse gas emission technology, trialing the technology, demonstrating the technology, how it works, what's out there, and facilitating the access to this technology. So, for example, I can mention the Green Voyage 2050 project, which is similar to biofouling, but focusing specifically on greenhouse gas emissions, and they will be trialing and demonstrating technology. There is another project which is called the GMN project, which has established regional technical centers in various areas on the globe to actually, again, trial technology, and they've been quite successful. They've, for example, trialed solar panels on a ferry. I think that was done by the MTCC base in the Pacific, with quite good results in terms of GHG emission savings. So yes, we're pushing, we're promoting, you know, for the development of technology, but obviously we need also, you know, more partnerships and more finances as well to scale up, you know, these technologies and make them accessible to everybody, including developing countries.
Thank you, and thank you for the question, Liz. Sir, would you like to go next?
Thank you so much for the interesting discussion. I am Tariq Timraz from Suez Canal University. And actually, I was wondering what sort of indicators have been used to identify the need for using of anti-fouling, because I am from an area where we applied various anti-fouling from the beginning, because it's inherited that the more you don't use anti-fouling, the more you need to do dry docking. And if you use wrong anti-fouling, such as TBT, it will impact on local biodiversity, especially the snails, where some people are eating these snails. So we crossed all of this environmental problem. But one thing I'm sure of is they already implemented using of anti-fouling. And the other way around to come over this problem is to ask for, like what we said, hull cleaning card. And I was trying to introduce it as a result to stop invasive species crossing the Suez Canal University, to ask every ship before it passes through the Suez Canal if they have their hull cleaned or not. So I believe it's a really nice project, but it needs a lot of coordination, as it will face a lot of obstacles to identify it in the scientific way, especially when we speak about biofouling, because it's really knows that if you try to estimate the amount of anti-fouling growing on a ship, you need to take standards. The sea state, is it rough, moderate, or calm sea? The type of anti-fouling growing, as well as the load of the ship itself, to at the end earn or get reproducible results. Otherwise, the results will be incomparable. And thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So you want to comment on that? Would you like to? Bev?
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting points there. And the first point is how complicated it is to select the right anti-fouling system for your ship. And that's, you know, it comes back to the cruise question as well, is that ships operate on very different profiles. A lot of them, they'll be traveling through different waters where they may be more susceptible to different organisms, different times of year where there's blooms, and some ships will stay stationary for longer, and that helps you know, the organisms stick. So there's a lot of complications about selecting the right coating. Once you've got your right coating or your wrong coating, you then need to kind of monitor that performance, and there's lots of different ways that ships are doing that now. A lot of them are looking at their fuel consumption and can tell. There are also new technologies out there that, you know, using ROVs, and, you know, even some ships carry them on board and they'll survey their hull constantly. So there's lots of technologies out there that are constantly monitoring the hull. But your point about cleaning is a really good one, and that's exactly why we've developed the standard, because we know that in-water cleaning could be a really big contributor to stop the hull fouling. And, you know, the standard that we've done, it should really support that if that's taken up by coastal states. So the next phase for us is that we have this industry standard, and what we're going to do is a pilot study, which will bring together lots of the stakeholders, and everyone's talked about stakeholders, ports, cleaning companies, survey companies, classification societies, regulators, and we're going to test the standard. We're going to look at who else will need to put in new standards into place into their operations to make sure in-water cleaning can be done anywhere environmentally sustainably, and also safely, because putting divers down to clean ships with brushes, you know, you have to have good safety standards as well. So it's not just about the environment, we also need to keep people safe as well. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Bev. While the audience thinks of the next question, I've actually got a question I'd like to ask Egypt, please. I've probably hung around marine engineers too long, but you talked about the hull fouling aspects, but can you also predict the effects of fouling on the propellers?
Okay, thank you for the question. So actually, by using the traditional methods, it's quite difficult. But if we use our computational fluid dynamics, which is greatly taking into account all the unsteady aspects, yes, it is possible. The results that I showed only focused on the hull fouling, but actually in the report, we will be covering the effect of fouling on propeller. And because the relationship between the hull fouling and propeller fouling is quite complicated, so we cannot really sum them up. So for example, we have different cases, say the hull is fouled and propeller is clean, other way around, or both of them are fouled. So the results become quite different, because in the normal circumstances, there is an interaction, like hull and propeller interaction. And to me, if you ask me, the only way to really calculate the effect of fouling on propellers, it would be the computational fluid dynamics, because otherwise you only rely on some assumptions.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Are there any last questions from the audience? I don't see anything online, virtually. Okay, so I'm just going to ask one more question. I'm going to direct it towards you, Bev, if I may. So what has been the reaction from the countries or industry of the BIMCO standard? that you mentioned earlier?
We've had a really good reaction, and I think that's the indication of that is how many people have joined our working groups and our subgroups and our small groups that are doing it in areas, and they've been across geographies, all kind of around the world, and across industry, and we're still getting requests to join those groups. And I think that there is, people see the need to have this consistent standard and this consistent application across the globe. And I think all the study will do, and the discussions we've had today will emphasize that will really, maybe we'll have another 20 companies want to join us after today when people realise, just how important this could be for reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from ships, and just how much of an impact us as an industry could have in a short timescale.
Great. Thank you very much, and thanks for sort of reiterating one of certainly my hobby horses around standards and harmonisation. I think that's a really helpful finish. So I can't see any more hands. So at this point, I guess it leads me to close the session. But firstly, may I thank our speakers and panelists for providing such an informative session with all your comments and observations. And to Mr. Kitak Lim for the opening address, to Mr. Yijit Demirel, Mr. Camille Bourgeon, Dr. Bev McKenzie, Dr. Andrew Hudson, High Commissioner Tuvaku, Dr. Lilia Kojet El-Keel, and Mr. Darren Jones. I'd also like to thank all those who have worked so hard to make the side event a success. Really do appreciate it. And to all the GloFouling Partnerships Project and the GIA, and to our co-organisers at ICS and IOGP. But of course, thank you all for attending this side event here physically in Glasgow, but also online. There's no doubt of the huge challenge ahead of us as we seek to achieve the goals Paris set down, and everybody attending this COP and across the globe will have a role to play. The shipping industry is not shy about taking on this challenge, certainly accepts the responsibility, but now needs to apply the lessons we have learned and also the insights that we've gained today as we move forward. So we'd encourage strongly, if any interested parties would like to keep in touch, this is an open invitation, please do. So at that point, it just leaves me to say thank you to everybody again. Thank you to the team up here. I think you did a tremendous job. You can take the rest of the day off from my perspective. And I'm now going to hand over to John, I hope, John Alonso, who is going to give you the details of the visit that you're all welcome to attend at the Kelvin Laboratory. John, over to you.
Thank you very much. If I may ask the people that have pre-registered for the visit to the Kelvin Hydrodynamics Laboratory, you can please gather outside, and once we finish this side event, we'll just walk for about 4 or 5 minutes, taking the side exit towards the Exhibition Centre rail station where we have a bus. There's a 15-minute drive up there, and then we'll return you here. And we'll have the opportunity, of course, to visit the laboratory where Dr. Demirel has been conducting some of his research, and you'll have the opportunity as well to make any further questions about this report if you want. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you all again.